So thank you very much, and we know that we're putting a lot of pressure on you. We're trying to cover a lot of material in a short period of time. Today has just been an amazing day, from the morning with the presentations we had this morning, the inspiration that came from those presentations, just unbelievable. And having the people this afternoon present on the crisis services, just very, very good. So next we want to move ahead with cognitive therapy, cognitive recovery therapy, and with Paul Grant. Paul Grant has been fantastic working with the states, really looking at how do we give hope to not only individuals who are having lived experience that have lost hope, but also to give to the people who work with them hope. It's really an important topic, and Paul is an expert on this, and I think this is going to be a really good presentation. So thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Brian. All right, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay, I can't hear me, but as long as you can hear me, that's good. All right, so here's our take-home messages. If you don't remember anything I say, I hope some of this will resonate with you. So one of these we want to focus on is a desired life is possible for everyone. It just might take longer for some. We can create this life through meaningful participation rather than symptom reduction. Anyone can play a significant role in an individual's progress. Sometimes, and we'll do a lot of this, the best treatment doesn't look like treatment. And here's a key one I hope you'll hold on to. An evidence-based approach can be successfully implemented at all levels of care. It is a matter of retooling the work of existing staff to produce transformative outcomes. So we're not talking about creating a whole new service here. We're really talking about the service that you have and being able to get more of it get going. And I'm going to end by featuring several states that have taken this work on. Okay, but maybe to sort of get you going, we'll try to personalize it. So I want you to imagine a gentleman who has spent his entire life essentially in inpatient settings since his early teenage years. 50 consecutive years in such a situation. The gentleman is really afraid of getting out of the hospital. He believes that, in fact, he's being held against his will in a foreign land, and that he's trying to protect the people in the service. At this sort of starting point, there are people like this we've found in a lot of places that we worked. So fast forward, this gentleman is now in the community. You can sometimes see him sitting with some friends, and they're talking about which jazz saxophonist is the best one. He's leading drives for animals to sort of help them out, and he wants to become a filmmaker. So from being stuck in the hospital for a long time, getting out. How did we do that? I want to talk about that. Another situation is a woman I want you to think about. She's in her 20s, and she's somebody who has been in institutions since she was about 12. She has a significant trauma history, but what really demands the high level of care for her is very serious and dangerous self-injury. And in fact, she has about 14 incidents a month, which is about as many as you could possibly have, because they're so serious that they demand medical attention each time. And 3-on-1s, 2-on-1s, changing the clothing, no matter what you do, it continues to happen. And can you imagine the look on her medical doctor's face when he describes how close a couple times the device came to piercing her aorta? So fast forward, a little longer here because the placement's a little more difficult, but in the community, going to nursing school, just joining artistic communities, discovering that there are all these beautiful apps that can teach you how to cook at home that anyone uses, and apparently anyone under 30 uses, and discovering these wonderful apps you can use to sing for people and things like that. So how did that happen? And then maybe just to have you think about a staff member who's really burnt out, who's kind of tired of these kinds of trainings and doesn't really like to do this. And then you fast forward a few months, and that person's now sort of almost an evangelist for the approach. Okay, so let me tell you about how we do all of this. We have an evidence base, and we have some theory behind what we do. The theory is what actually allows us to figure out some of the challenges I just described for you. I'm not going to focus on the research as much here because I want to focus a little bit more on what some of the states are doing, but I'll give you a little sense for the evidence base. So we're going to really focus on connection, because I think so many of the people that we're going to be focusing on don't really have very much of that. And I think that connection is one of the best predictors of poor health outcomes that you can find. Whether or not you are given a mental health diagnosis, it's not good for you more generally. And a lot of the things I just described for you, you can see how the people are incredibly disconnected from other people. So that's going to be a core of what we do. I want to introduce you to this man. This is my mentor and good friend. This is Dr. Aaron Beck, and he still is around, which he wants me to tell you. He turned 98 recently, which is a lot older than I think any of us expect to be, and certainly older than he's expected to be. He would be here if he was able, but he has, at this point in time, seen every medical doctor ever studied in medical school. So he's not able to be here physically, but his mind is wonderful, and anything I say that you might like probably was something he said before I said it. So I just want to give you that. Now here is something that really is one of his shining glories. This is a revolutionary paper from 1963 when Kennedy was president, and this introduces cognitive therapy, but it also introduces the theory we use, the cognitive model. So I just want to call out this great paper. He's recently written, if you're interested, his history of 60 years of doing all this stuff, and there's something coming in psychiatric services that will take it to 70. But this is the cool thing about working with something that has been around for 60 years. Look at all these great things it's been applied to. So if you think of any person that we might be working with who might have some significant challenges of not getting their life, look at all of these. They probably have some combination of these things. So how we become person-centered and figure out some of what's going on is we have a beautiful theoretical model that helps us with whatever we see. Very, very helpful on the front lines. So this is a way of thinking about it as applied to, say, somebody who might be given a diagnosis of a serious mental health condition like schizophrenia. And so the idea is that there are beliefs about the self, others, and the future. And those beliefs sort of manifest in whatever the challenges are the person is showing you. So they see themselves as weak, vulnerable, ineffective, and worthless. They see others as controlling, dangerous, and rejecting, and they just don't feel like they have a future. So for example, the gentleman who is sort of watching vigilantly over the unit, who won't go out of the hospital, in his case, he really has a sense of that the world isn't safe, and he's really afraid that he's going to be harmed. And so in fact, he actually carries around all his money on him because he's so afraid he's going to be, people are going to steal from him. And he really wants to be, he really feels unimportant and not heard and things of that sort. So he rejects when people come towards him. What I want to also draw your attention to is the cognitive model turns out to be a beautiful way to think about recovery, resiliency, and empowerment. Because what people want, what this gentleman wants, he wants to be heard. He wants to be respected. He wants to be able to make a difference. He wants to belong. So these are the kinds of beliefs that people are going for. I'm a good person. I have purpose. I'm successful. That kind of thing. Other people appreciate me. Other people will love me. That kind of thing. And in the future, I can make a difference. So the cognitive model is really useful to us. I think I'm going to skip over this because I don't really have time to share with you all of this, but there's a fair amount of research supporting this approach for the kinds of people that we're trying to help in sort of supporting the models that have been used in the various states. So I have a fair number of slides here just trying to show you how that looks, but this is just all sort of science to show you that. This is kind of interesting. Here, it's a recent paper we had trying to show that what's often called the neurocognitive impairment has a lot of psychosocial contributors. And when you consider all of those and you work with someone, you might very well find that they can do anything they want to do. We think this is a really the kind of thing that's very encouraging for individuals and families and also providers. We also did a validation study, but again, I think I want to move ahead to how we actually do this work. But just to show you that we worked without patients who really weren't having much of the life that they wanted. We did a version of the approach that I'm going to tell you about, and we helped them improve their lives. And in many instances, these are people that really their day was about, they were smoking cigarettes, sitting outside, watching TV. They just weren't doing a lot with other people, and they really started to do that by the end. And then we did a follow-up study where we showed that after the treatment was withdrawn, you still could show that people were better. They changed their life. They were on the way to something better and something that they really wanted. And this is essentially a interesting looking diagram that's trying to show you that recovery extends to all. There's nobody who's too severe. And the reason I say that is that this is the sort of improvement in the community for people over the course of this treatment. On the x-axis or along the horizontal is just the assessment time points. The y-axis or the vertical is really how much better the person is doing. And the dashed line is people who are earlier on, so like 5 years, 10 years, after their diagnosis in their study. The thick line is the people, it's 20 years, 30 years, 40 years since they got the diagnosis. So that bottom line is the one I'm interested in because it goes up slower, but it goes up significantly, and the people start to get their life. So I think it's important, there's evidence that nobody's too severe, has had things too long to get the life they want. And I take you back to that gentleman who had been in the hospital for 50 years. He's on that lower line there, and he's getting the life he wants. So I want to show you how we do it. There's some evidence base. If you're interested in more of it, I can certainly talk with you later. The key concept that we used is a theory of modes. It's something that Dr. Beck developed a long time ago. And you talk about how you're in, you might be in survival mode, you might be in work mode, you might be in vacation mode. So that's kind of a sort of colloquial way of thinking about the concept. But really what we're thinking about is that people aren't in any they have sort of best moments. They have moments when they're very different. And we found this as a very effective teaching tool, actually. We know that you're not sure why this gentleman, he's always sort of yelling at you and that kind of things, but is he ever not like that? Oh, well, yeah, when you talk about jazz music, all of a sudden he really brightens up, and boy, does he know a heck of a lot about music from the 50s. It kind of blows you away. So that's what we're looking for. We call that kind of thing the adaptive mode. I think if you think of your own life, just when are you at your best? When do you really feel like you're showing all of your best sides? That's what we're looking for in the people that we're working with. And usually we can find it with the right kinds of examples, trying to find them at their best. And what we're thinking is these are people that largely experience not their best self, not the self they want to have. They tend to experience the things I was telling you about, being weak and unloved. And this sort of mode has better things in it, and they show it. When the person's in this mode, you can see that they feel confident. They feel like they're a contributing person, that kind of thing. So we want to find this mode and really grow it. So one of the reasons we've been able to really put this approach in a lot of places is that it's very adaptable. And so it's not an individual therapy per se, although it can be. It's not a group therapy per se, although it can be. It's not a milieu therapy per se, but it can be, and very effective there. I heard somebody mentioning milieu just a little bit earlier. And finally, it's very, very useful for planning the way that teams work, especially with people who are having a lot of challenges, like going in and out of the hospital, that kind of thing. And sort of this is a slide that tries to illustrate the way that every interaction that anybody has with the person, no matter what their role is in the organization, they don't have to be a clinician, they don't even have to be involved in any of the clinical care. Just sort of the way in which you engage somebody, the way you sort of bring out their best side, and then you sort of are working together on something that really matters to them. And then ultimately, there's ways in which you can sort of plug in whatever they're working on and find out the meanings of those things. And then when you need to have problem solving, you can do that. But ultimately, it's an active approach, and I'll try to illustrate to you exactly how this looks. So this is sort of the basic model that we have. And it's not that we're implying that it's linear, just that it's positive, and that the person feels a real sort of push forward. So initially, like if you think about the gentleman I was telling you about, that's a gentleman the staff had a hard time talking with. He tended to cuss them out, and they kind of left him alone. So how do we find his best self? And then how do we start to build that up? So we're going to access what we're calling the adaptive mode. And then what we want to do is we want to access it more often so we can build up the energy, build up the connection, and ultimately trust. What we're looking for is trust. So ultimately, connection is at the heart of this sort of approach. You have to have a relationship. And again, like I said before, this can be done by any of the people who are already in the service and present. Then what we want to do is we want to really help the person develop their life, really sort of get the life that they really want to be having. And that's really developing the adaptive mode. We're really going to talk about aspirations at that point. And then what we want to help them do is actually get that meaning into every single day. Because they may have had a very long period of time when they haven't had the meaning at all. And they might be, like the gentleman I told you about, getting it in ways that seems to be keeping them in a hospital, keeping them from the life they want. And then the last bit of it is really about just helping the person change their perspective and growing this positive perspective, their sense of resiliency that they can handle things. This is a tool that we use in this process called a recovery map. And one of the things we discovered in working in a lot of mental health settings is that a one-page document is really good. It's very helpful for teams. And if it starts to be a lot longer than that, we can lose a lot of people. So we've managed to condense everything into this one page, and we found that this is really quite useful across levels of care, within a level of care, that kind of thing. And it leads with, really leads with all the positive stuff, because we need those things to be able to really work on challenges. So if a person's having a challenge with self-injury, like the woman I told you about, going directly at that is not very motivating for her. But if we're looking at what she really wants with her life, and what she wants to do is she wants to be a psychiatric nurse, she wants to be able to have a family, and that kind of stuff, that stuff's meaningful. And in the context, she can't do that in the hospital where she's at. She certainly can't do it if she's going in and out of the hospital injuring herself. So that becomes the kind of fulcrum for really pushing her life forward and being able to handle the challenges as they come up. So that was probably like speed dating. I apologize for that. But trying to give you a sense for the things. So the idea is we have a concept of adaptive mode. We access person's best self, then we help them develop it by really finding out what their aspirations are. And I told you what the woman's are, really making them rich for the person. And that's like an image. So the woman's image of her aspiration, she can see herself pushing the cart up the unit with the animals on it as she has the smiling kids. When she thinks about her partner, she sees them holding hands, and she sees the river going by, and they sit down and they drink coffee. So just to give in, that's what's going to be helpful when all of a sudden she gets a really strong urge to hurt herself, that she can focus her energy on that stuff, and it's very powerful. So implementation. So here's a big shout out to the state of Georgia. So Georgia has been a pioneer in implementing this approach. And as you can see, they have multiple phases there on the slide. Initially in Georgia, the starting point was to try to sort of work with the existing staff in state hospitals and also in the community to try to help people who are having a difficult time either getting out of the hospital or really remaining in the community to do so. So we worked with people who were already present, and we trained them with a model that involves some workshops and ongoing consultation, which I think is really key. In all the states, we've used ongoing consultation. I'll show you some data in a second that I think shows it worked pretty well in Georgia. And so Georgia invested in developing their own center for training in recovery-oriented cognitive therapy. There were 3 trainers at that center. They collaborate with us just to keep us all good. And they have been essentially rolling this out. They've extended into adolescents, and they've grown the network. And we did a really interesting project. Georgia got one of the NASMHPD TTI grants. We did a really cool project where we showed that peer specialists in particular could do some really innovative work utilizing this model, staying within their scope of practice. Really fantastic stuff. So here's the data. I've got an unfortunate, did I turn it off? Oh, there we go. I get paranoid sometimes. So I have an unfortunate couple words on this slide because it's an old slide, but here's what I want you to see in this slide. What we have here is the people in Georgia that we trained in our first phase, and they were people, like I said, who were there. We didn't select them because they were special. They were the ones working with the individuals. The individuals that were recruited for this were the ones that were having the most difficulty. So we have folks who are really challenged, not getting the life they want, the people who are working with them. And what I want you to see in this slide is in 6 months' time, which was the amount of time we had for our consultation in this. These therapists and clinicians were able to get 2/3 of the people to make at least significant progress in one of the SAMHSA recovery dimensions. So recovery dimensions are measurable, and people who seem like they haven't done this in a long time are able to get them, and people who are already in the service there can do it. So I think this is really promising and great work. Again, shout out to Georgia. Hey, Terry, that's more than I expected. I love it. Okay, Philadelphia is not a state, although it's a state of mind. But we started there, and we set up a pretty nice network. Yeah, I live there, so I guess I can make fun of family. So what we started a project there. We've developed essentially a network of care there that links the state hospital up with independent living. And one of the focuses has been on forensic, people who get into the forensic system and get stuck there. And I just wanted to show you some of the outcomes, preliminary outcomes in some of that work. We've got a jail diversion program that we're using, and then we're also introducing programming in the state hospital that then extends into residency residences in the community. And I just think we're having a huge reduction in sort of institutionalization. People who historically have been in jail and been in hospitals are in those much less. Now what we have to see is if they're actually doing the life, they're living the life that we hope they want to be living. It's nice to be out of an institution, but you ought to be really living. So we'll see. Stay tuned. Maybe I'll get a chance to share that with you in a couple years. Now I want to shout out to New York State. I realize there is a song that's called New York State of Mind. But anyways, New York also got one of the TTI grants. And New York decided, New York's system, as far as I understand it, is organized around its psychiatric centers. But what was surprising for me to learn is so much of that treatment is actually outpatient treatment. So we worked in Staten Island as our pilot project. And there's a state hospital there, but there's a lot of outpatient services. So we were really trying to set up a continuity of care to help people move down to lower levels of care and really get more of the life that they want. We did a little bit of piloting in a couple of the other facilities and made some awfully cool videos with Columbia University. And I want to show you that there's just a little bit of outcome data that's come out of that. So again, really promising kind of stuff that people are stepping down to lower levels of care than they have before. And then psychologically, they're feeling less alone, because I think that's something that's really profound for so many of the people. They feel so alone. They're feeling more hopeful, and they have a sense that they're flourishing a little bit more. I actually think flourishing is a really great outcome, and possibly one that's more appealing to people than wellness. Sort of, I heard somebody talk about wellness. Well, all right, I'm well, what for? And I think that's what flourishing is about. What's the life you want to have and how you're going to have it? And then the staff at the hospital was really thrilled that the individuals are taking care of themselves a little bit more. And I think we understand that once you have a reason to get up in the morning, once you have a reason to shower and take care of some other things, or really take care of your forensic issues or any of those kinds of things, that stuff fits into your life. I'm going to steal this moment with New York. How many of you know Maslow's pyramid? Okay. It's amazing how well that's done. I think Beck is jealous. Anyway, so the pyramid is a hierarchy of needs, right? And the people that we're often working at, they most struggle with the bottom part. Right? That's the harder part, the basic stuff. So what we're doing is we're using the top part, just call it your mission, your purpose, as a way to help them with the bottom part. It actually really fits together nicely for people. So New York is doing some lovely stuff, and we've expanded. We began workshops this week. These are all the downstate facilities that we're moving into, and every one of them is different and unique, and we're doing a different kind of implementation in all of them. 2 of those, I will draw your attention, are forensic only facilities. So we're really also focusing on people who have forensic involvement, trying to help them out. So kudos to New York. Montana, a little different than New York. There probably are more people in a small section of Long Island than in all the state of Montana. We were told when we were there last there are 1 million people in the entire state. However, to fly across the state takes an hour and a half or hour and 3/4. If I get on a plane in Philadelphia, I get to Atlanta by then. So that's a big place. So it's big, and there's not a lot of people there. So it's about loneliness. It's about the sparsity of the services. So what we did in Montana is we collaborated with a great group there to focus on their state hospital, because they were having the same problem of people getting stuck there or going in and out of there. And then working with community agencies that they deliver to attempt to bring this kind of thing, so this kind of care to Montana. They don't do as many evidence-based practices as some states, so it was really kind of a cool experience because they jumped into it with Western gusto. And we saw some amazing outcomes, kind of like the gentleman I was describing for you, so people really changing a lot. And so for Montana, what we're doing is, see, there's that big state. We've just started a second phase out there, and they divided the state into thirds, and each of those thirds is probably bigger than most states. And we're beginning to create a network of trainers out there, sort of on the Georgia model a little bit, but without a university at the heart of it, to then support a much bigger outreach for trainers across a very, very vast state. We had people who drove 7.5 hours without leaving the state to come to the workshop. Big place. Wonderful place. Kudos to Montana. All right, Vermont. I often confuse Vermont and Montana, and I shouldn't, because Vermont is small. but I think they're beautiful. They're really beautiful. And I did enjoy going to but just kind of the opposite thing. So in Vermont has its system organized around mental health centers. They used to have a fairly large state hospital, which has become the Department of Health. A very small state hospital, like 20 beds or something like that. And then they have this. So we worked with the community centers, and some of them are really quite innovative. Like there's a Sotera program out in Burlington, which is coming back, kind of an interesting model to mix with our psychological model. And then working in each of the agencies had a particular focus, but typically it was residential, and again, mixed with people really sort of struggling about really getting into their life and that kind of thing. And the Middlesex is actually, again, a forensic facility that's run by the state. So again, trying to help people with forensic involvement get out of these facilities, take care of whatever the forensic issues are, and move on with their lives. And so Vermont is actually, Vermont has some really innovative programs related to homelessness and also to work programs, and so we're expanding into those areas in a second phase up there. New Jersey, I have not forgot about New Jersey. So in New Jersey, they also got a TTI grant, and the focus in New Jersey was on the really innovative program that really, and I think it fits this conference probably as well as anything we've talked about, because it's about integrative health and mental health care. And so they're called behavioral health homes, if you haven't heard of them. And it's really a team. It's not the home makes it, I think, feel a little closer than an ACT team, so it's kind of a good name. But it's really a team that's supporting all of those sorts of things. But one of the reasons that our model, I think, is useful in that setting is that there's a fair number of people who are given one of the serious mental health diagnoses who don't feel motivated to take care of their health. It's one of the reasons that they die younger, and they don't take care of themselves. And we understand this in terms of the beliefs that I didn't take you through that much. Why bother? I'm just a broken mental health patient. I'm not really valuable. These kinds of beliefs would lead you to not answer the door when your team comes. So we collaborated with 4 of these teams, sort of in the middle of the state, and with a train-the-train model that involved a Rutgers team, to really sort of empower these teams to get in the door, start to find out about people. And we had this beautiful gathering in New Jersey at the end of the project, where some of the people who had done this talked about how there's this individual that they just didn't know a lot about, never could reach, and now they knew all these beautiful things about them, and they had a really good relationship. So it starts with the relationships, moves out into the life, and ultimately people having their first doctor's appointments after decades of not doing that kind of thing. So we're talking to New Jersey about doing a little bit more, so yay, New Jersey. And then finally, Massachusetts. And Massachusetts also has some really innovative work, and so the project was really put in several places: acute setting, state hospital, community teams that focused on mental health, community teams that focused on forensic, also homelessness. There are a couple of unbelievably beautiful stories involving people who are homeless in rural areas, because that's somewhat of a challenge to get really impactful work there. And in Massachusetts, they've done some really great stuff in that way. I want to just conclude. Oh, yay, Massachusetts. Sorry about that. I know. Sorry about that. It's a kind of approach that pretty much anyone can be a part of, given their scope of work. And so these are the kinds of people that have been trained in this. I hope I got everybody in there. I wanted to mention something that one of the ways this works, again, it's the people who are already there doing the work, and then there's ways to measure how well everybody's doing, set aspirations, and self-sustain. So it's ultimately a sustainable thing. We are involved just to sort of seed it, but ultimately you fire us and you do fabulously. Right, so here's sort of a way that we look at that. So at the last moment, I spoke with the young woman I was telling you about, and I told her one of her goals is to really make a difference in the world. And she wrote me something she wants me to read to you in terms of what this meant to her, now that she's back in the community doing things. And she wanted me to use her first name, so I will use her first name. Her name is Maggie. This is from Maggie. I am now able to recognize my self-worth while feeling like I have a purpose. Trauma used to steal that away from me. And CTR helped me live not only as a survivor, but as a thriver in my everyday life. CTR helped me gain independence at a time where I thought I would never leave the confines of institutionalization. Purpose has been the most important thing in getting control over my life and how I deal with stress. It isn't about distraction from stress. It's refocusing the energy I was spending onto something that makes me feel like I have purpose. Another thing I took away from CTR was that relapse doesn't make me a bad person, but it's something that happens and I can just get back on track. Decatastrophize it, exclamation point. Before CTR, I used to hate myself for it and labeled it as making a mistake. Now I see I can just get back on track and keep going. CTR helped me focus on things I'm looking forward to. Advocating for those who don't have a voice, no longer being a statistic, being asked to share my experience for this meeting is a real honor. I want to be a trailblazer. Going to school and work without fear of judgment. Having love and a family life where I don't continually dwell on not being good enough for my partner and kids. That's why we do it. Thank you.